The first time the Vaughn asked for help, we gave it. We gave them food when their crops failed. We gave them medicine when their plagues spread. We gave them ships when their enemies circled. They called us friends. They called us saviors. My name is Elias Vance, and I was a supply officer for the Terran Aid Fleet. That was before the Vaughn forgot who saved them. The Vaughn are tall creatures with silver skin and eyes like pools of light. They built an empire on trade and diplomacy. They controlled everything, and when Earth needed help, when a solar flare wiped out half our colonies and left millions starving, the Vaughn remembered us. They remembered us as the ones who gave and gave until there was nothing left. Our ambassador went to them. She stood in their crystal halls and begged for aid, just a fraction of what we had given them. They smiled those beautiful silver smiles and said no. They said their resources were stretched thin. They said perhaps next time. They said nothing about the debt. I watched families who lost everything learn that the Vaughn had turned us away. I watched a father hand his dying child to a medic and walk into the darkness. The Vaughn took in every other species, everyone except us. Because we had given freely, they thought we would always be there. They were wrong. The recovery took 40 years. 40 years of rebuilding, of scraping by, of watching other species thrive while we ate ration bars. 40 years of the galaxy forgetting that Earth had ever been strong. I grew old in those years, not in body, thanks to the treatments we salvaged, but in spirit. I watched hope drain from my people's eyes. I watched our ships rust in orbit because we couldn't afford fuel, and I watched the Vaughn build monuments to their own generosity, monuments funded by the wealth we had given them. They built a statue on their capital world. It showed a Vaughn diplomat lifting a human child from the mud. They called it the gift of mercy. They taught their children that we were a primitive race they saved. They rewrote history. They erased our aid. The Vaughn controlled the information networks. They owned the media. They paid the historians. They buried every record of what we had done. I sat in a bar on Titan Station, watching a Vaughn trade delegation walk through. They wore fine clothes and expensive jewelry. They didn't look at the humans they passed. To them, we were furniture. A young man sat next to me. He was born long after the famine. He watched the delegation with anger in his eyes. He asked if the stories were true, if we had really saved them, if they had really abandoned us. I told him everything. He listened. Then he asked a question. What if we made them remember? I didn't have an answer then, but I started thinking about it. The movement started small. A few historians digging through archives, a few journalists broadcasting the truth on fringe networks, a few politicians demanding repayment in galactic courts. The Vaughn laughed at us. They called us bitter. They said we should move on, forgive and forget. They said the debt was imaginary. The galaxy laughed with them, because that's what the galaxy does. It sides with the winners. And the Vaughn were winning. They had been winning for 40 years. We were just the losers, the ones who couldn't let go. But the movement grew anyway. It grew in the shadows, in mining colonies and scavenger camps and refugee settlements. It grew in the hearts of people who remembered. We called ourselves the Remembrance. We weren't soldiers. We were just people who refused to let the lie stand. We collected evidence. We recorded testimonies. We waited for our moment. It came sooner than we expected. A Vaughn trade convoy was caught smuggling weapons to pirates attacking human colonies. Weapons we had given them decades ago, stamped with Earth markings. Weapons they claimed they had destroyed. The galaxy saw the proof. The galaxy saw the lie.
For the first time in 40 years, the galaxy stopped laughing. The Vaan panicked. They came to us with offers of repayment, compensation, friendship renewed. They came with smiles and promises. Elias Vance stood in the council chamber that day. He looked at the Vaan delegation. He listened to their offers. When they finished, he stood up and walked out without a word, because he knew their promises were empty. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry they got caught. The Vaan didn't understand our silence. They couldn't comprehend why we didn't accept their offers. In their minds, they had done what any powerful species would do. They expected us to understand, to forgive, to be grateful. We gave them nothing, just silence. It drove them crazy. They sent more delegations. They increased their offers. They promised everything. We gave them nothing. They tried threats next. They cut off trade. They blocked medical supplies. They spread rumors we were unstable. It didn't work. The galaxy had seen the proof. The galaxy was watching. Elias called a meeting of the Remembrance leadership, 12 of us in a bunker under Chicago, historians, journalists, engineers, and one soldier, Marcus Thorne, young but with old eyes. He had fought in border skirmishes where humans died alone. He had survived. Marcus spoke first. He said the Vaan wouldn't negotiate in good faith. They never had. The only language they understood was force. We should take what we were owed. The others argued. Violence would ruin our moral standing. The galaxy would turn against us. We should keep working through courts, through diplomacy. Marcus listened. Then he asked a simple question. How many more of our people have to die while we wait for justice? Elias didn't have an answer, because Marcus was right. Every day we waited, more humans died, from lack of medicine, from lack of food, from lack of hope. Could we fight? Could we become what the Vaan always accused us of being? Elias looked at Marcus and gave his answer. One word, yes. We didn't have a fleet. We didn't have an army. We didn't have weapons. What we had was 40 years of anger, 40 years of planning, and we had Marcus Thorne. Marcus had spent his adult life preparing. He had studied every war in human history. He had built something in the shadows, a resistance, a force that existed only in whispers. We called it the Reckoning. The Vaan didn't know about us. They never looked. To them, we were still the weak ones, the givers, the forgivers. They had no idea what we had become. The first strike was small, surgical, invisible. We hit a Vaan data center on a remote moon, not to destroy it, just to copy it. We took every record, every transaction, every communication. We took the truth. The Vaan didn't notice. A data glitch on a remote moon. It happened all the time. Marcus brought the data to Elias. They spent weeks going through it, building a case. But that wasn't the point anymore. The courts had failed us. This was about memory, about making sure no one ever forgot what the Vaan had done. The second strike was bigger. We hit a Vaan supply depot on a major trade route. Not to steal, just to disrupt. We wanted them to notice. They noticed. They sent investigators. They increased security. They started asking questions. Paranoia led to mistakes. The third strike was personal. We hit a Vaan luxury transport. We didn't kill anyone. We just took them. 2 young Vaan named Vel and Soren. We showed them the truth. The ships we gave, the food we sent, the lives we saved, the famine camps, the dying children. By the time we let them go, they believed. That was the point. Not to hurt them, just to make them remember.
The Varn didn't release the story of Vel and Sorin. They couldn't. It would have destroyed everything. So they buried it. They silenced Vel and Sorin. They erased their records. They pretended they never existed. They thought that would be enough. They were wrong, because we had the data. We had the proof, and we had patience. We had waited 40 years. We could wait longer. The next phase wasn't about attacks. It was about information, about truth, about making sure every species knew what the Varn had done. We started small, anonymous leaks to fringe media, whispers in trading posts, rumors spread by travelers. The truth spread on its own. The Varn tried to stop it. They increased censorship. They blocked channels. They threatened journalists. But the truth finds a way. The galaxy started talking, started asking questions, started remembering. The Varn panicked. They came to us through back channels, through intermediaries. They offered more this time. Full repayment, interest, apologies, reparations, everything. Elias listened. Then he laughed. Not a cruel laugh, a sad, tired laugh. The laugh of a man who had waited too long, who had seen too many die. He told the intermediaries to deliver a message. Collect your debt. We did. Now you beg for mercy. The Varn didn't understand. They thought we wanted them to admit what they had done. They didn't realize the debt wasn't about money anymore. It was about memory, about making sure no species ever forgot what happened when you betrayed humanity. Marcus understood. He looked at Elias and nodded, because they both knew what came next, something that would haunt the Varn long after we were gone. We didn't attack the Varn. We didn't invade their worlds. We did something worse. We gave them what they wanted. Every record, every file, every piece of data. We gave them the truth. We broadcast it across every channel in the galaxy. No commentary, no editorial, just the truth. The food shipments when their crops failed, the medical teams when their plagues spread, the ships when their enemies attacked, and then the famine camps on Earth, the dying children, the begging ambassadors, and the Varn's response? No. We showed the galaxy the weapons they used against us, the records of their diplomats laughing. The galaxy reacted. Protests erupted on 100 worlds. Varn diplomats were attacked. Varn goods were boycotted. Varn ships were turned away. The galaxy turned on them. In days, it was all gone. The lies, the empire, the power. They came to us again, in person this time. Their highest leaders, their oldest diplomats. They came to the ruins of our cities, to the camps where our people still lived. They came to beg. An ancient Varn named Sorval stepped forward. He said they had come to apologize, truly apologize. He said they had been wrong, cruel, selfish. He said they were sorry. Elias listened. When Sorval finished, Elias nodded. He accepted the apology. He forgave them. He said we could move forward together. The Varn looked relieved. They looked hopeful. They didn't understand. Forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. The debt wasn't forgiven. It was transformed. It was no longer about money. It was about memory. And memory never fades. The galaxy celebrated our forgiveness. They called us noble, generous, the bigger species. They wrote articles and built statues. They turned our pain into a parable. They didn't understand. They hadn't lived through the famine. They hadn't watched their children die. They saw our forgiveness as strength. They didn't see it for what it was, strategy. The Varn, relieved, opened their borders to us, markets, technology, resources. They treated us like honored friends. They thought we had moved on. They were wrong.
Marcus understood. He knew forgiveness wasn't the end, it was a new beginning. He started small, a few humans here and there, traders, diplomats, students. They went to Varn worlds, they learned Varn ways, they made Varn friends, they became part of Varn society, and they remembered the famine, the camps, the dying children. They remembered everything, and they waited. The Varn didn't notice. The humans were friendly, grateful, exactly what the Varn wanted, weak, forgiving, forgetful. They had no idea every human was a witness, a reminder. Years passed. The Varn rebuilt. They recovered their power. They started to forget. Not the apology. They remembered that. They told it as a story of their own nobility. They didn't tell the other story, the famine, the debt. They thought they had won. They were wrong. We had something they didn't: patience, purpose, memory, and Marcus. Marcus was old now, the treatments failing, but his mind was sharp, his purpose clear. He called a meeting, the ones who remembered. He told us it was time to collect.
The Varn had a holiday, Unity Day. It celebrated the reconciliation, the apology, the forgiveness. Their favorite holiday. They decorated cities with lights, held parades, told stories of their humility. They didn't tell the other stories. On Unity Day, 20 years after the apology, we made our move. Not violent, not destructive. We just started talking. Every human on every Varn world, traders, diplomats, students, friends, we started telling the truth. Not the truth the galaxy knew, the other truth. The famine, the camps, the dying children, the ships we gave, the food we sent, the lives we saved, the debt. We told it quietly at first, in conversations, in letters, then louder, in speeches, in public squares, then everywhere. The Varn panicked. They tried to stop us, to censor us, to silence us, but we were everywhere. Their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues, impossible to silence. The galaxy watched again. They watched the Varn squirm. They watched the truth spread. They watched the debt remembered. This time, they didn't celebrate our forgiveness. They watched in silence, because they knew forgiveness wasn't forgetting. The Varn leaders came to us, not Sorval. He was dead. His successors, younger, more desperate. They demanded we stop, respect the reconciliation, honor the forgiveness. Marcus met them from his hospital bed, too weak to stand, too stubborn to die. They stood around him, demanding. He listened, then he smiled. He said the debt wasn't about money anymore. It was about memory. Memory doesn't negotiate, he said. They spent 70 years trying to make us forget. They failed. We would spend the next 70 making the galaxy remember. Because if we forgot, the children who died would have died for nothing. That was something we would never allow. Marcus died 3 days later, quietly, in his sleep. No pain, no fear. He had done what he set out to do, made sure the galaxy remembered. We buried him in the ruins of Chicago, where we first planned the reckoning. Elias spoke at the funeral, older than anyone, more ghost than man. He talked about Marcus, his courage, his vision. Then he said something that stopped our breath. The reckoning wasn't over, it was just beginning. The Varn had tried to make us forget. They failed. But there were other species, other empires, other powers who had also forgotten, who had also taken from us, who also owed debts. We spent 70 years focused on the Varn. Time to look farther, time to make everyone remember. The crowd was silent. They hadn't thought about the others, but Elias was right. The Varn weren't the only ones. They were just the first, the ones who turned us away, who watched us suffer, who profited from our weakness. They were everywhere, the galaxy, and we had their deaths too, not written down, but remembered by us, the ones who lived through the famine, who watched their children die, who would never forget. The reckoning expanded. We sent humans to every species, every world, every empire that had taken from us and forgotten. Traders, diplomats, students, friends. We sent them to remember, to watch, to wait, to collect. The galaxy didn't notice. Humans were everywhere, harmless, the ones who gave and never asked. They didn't know we were asking now. They didn't know we were remembering. They didn't know we were collecting debts never written down, but they would learn. The first sign came from the Xylos, an ancient species. They had seen everything. They hadn't seen us. The Xylos had a debt, not big like the Varn, but a debt. 100 years ago, we sent them medical teams during a plague, saved millions. They thanked us politely and forgot. Now they remembered, not because we reminded them, because our people among them started talking, quietly, then louder, about the plague, the medical teams, the lives saved, the thanks forgotten, the debt. The Xylos didn't know what to do. They had never been confronted with their own history. They tried to ignore it, dismiss it, but the talking continued. The remembering continued. The debt became impossible to ignore. They came to us in confusion. They didn't understand why we brought up the past, why we couldn't move on. They didn't understand that moving on meant forgetting. Elias met with them, older than ever, more ghost than man, but his voice was strong, his purpose clear. He told them what he told the Varn. The debt wasn't about repayment, it was about memory, about making sure no species ever forgot what they owed, about making sure next time a species needed help, the galaxy remembered what happened to those who forgot. The Xylos understood. They were ancient, wise. They didn't offer repayment. They offered something more valuable. They offered to remember, to tell the story, to make sure their children knew what humans had done and what they had forgotten. That was enough, because that was the point, not the debt, the memory of the debt, the reminder that kindness is never truly free. The galaxy still owes us, and we will never let them forget. The Orin were next, peaceful species, artists and philosophers. They had never hurt anyone, never taken anything, never owed anyone anything except us. 150 years ago, their sun started dying, their worlds grew cold, their people faced extinction. We gave them everything, ships to evacuate, food to survive, homes on our worlds, crowded and poor, but alive. We saved them. They thanked us. They moved on, built new lives, created new art. They forgot, not deliberately, just naturally. But we didn't forget. Every time we looked at our own worlds, still poor, still struggling, we remembered the ships we gave, the food we sent, the homes we shared, the debt. Our people among the Orin started talking, quietly, then louder, about the dying sun, the evacuation, the homes we gave, the thanks forgotten, the debt. The Orin were horrified at themselves. They had genuinely forgotten, focused on surviving, rebuilding, creating. They had lost track of who saved them. They came to us in shame, offered everything, their art, their technology, their worlds. They offered to give it all back with interest, with gratitude. Elias met with them, the last of the originals,
the only one left who remembered the famine firsthand, who watched children die, who stood in the camps, ancient, barely alive, held together by machines and memory. But his voice was clear, his purpose strong. He told them the same thing. The debt wasn't about repayment, it was about memory, about making sure the story was told, the sacrifice remembered. The Orin understood. They were artists. They understood the power of stories. They promised to tell ours, to every species, every world, every generation, to make sure no one ever forgot what humans had done. That was enough, because that was the point, not the debt, the story of the debt, the truth that would never be erased again. The Droll were different, warriors. They built their empire on conquest and blood. They never asked for help, never needed it, never owed anyone anything except us. 200 years ago, their enemies surrounded them, their fleets shattered, their worlds burning. They came to us, not as allies, not as friends, as beggars. They came to the species they had mocked, called weak. They came to us for help. We gave it. We sent our ships, our soldiers, our pilots. We fought beside them, died beside them, saved them. They thanked us. Then they forgot, went back to conquering, back to their empire, back to mocking us. Our people among the Droll started talking, quietly at first, then louder, about the battle, the ships we sent, the soldiers who died, the lives saved, the thanks forgotten, the debt. The Droll reacted differently. They were warriors. They understood debt. In their culture, debt was blood. They came to us not in shame, not in confusion, in respect. Their war leader stood before our council, a massive creature covered in scars. He spoke simply. He said the Droll remembered now. They remembered the battle, the humans who died beside them, the debt of blood. He said the Droll paid their debts, always. He offered their fleets, their armies, their worlds, whatever we needed, whenever we needed it, for as long as the Droll existed. Elias met with him, old, tired, but his eyes still burned. He told the war leader the same thing. The debt wasn't about repayment, it was about memory, about making sure the story was told. The Droll war leader understood, better than most. He promised the Droll would tell the story, around every campfire, before every battle, to every generation. The debt of blood would never be forgotten. That was enough, because that was the point. Not the fleets, not the armies, the memory, the story, the truth that would never die.
Years passed, decades, centuries. Elias was gone now. Marcus was gone. All the originals were gone. But the remembrance continued. The reckoning continued. Humans spread across the galaxy, to every species, every world, every empire. Not as conquerors, as witnesses, as reminders. We collected debts, not in ledgers, in memories. We told stories, the famine, the camps, the dying children, the ships we gave, the food we sent, the lives we saved, the thanks forgotten. Species listened, some with shame, some with respect, some with fear, but all listened and all remembered. The galaxy changed, not because we demanded repayment, because we demanded memory. Species started helping each other more, started remembering kindness, started honoring debts, not because they were afraid of us, because they were afraid of forgetting, because they saw what forgetting did to the Varn, to the Xylos, to the Orin, to the Drowl. They saw the shame, the guilt, the weight of memory. They didn't want that weight, so they remembered, they honored, they paid forward, not to us, to each other. The galaxy became kinder, not because of laws, not because of treaties, because of memory,
because of stories, because of us, the weak ones, the givers, the forgivers. We changed the galaxy without firing a shot, without conquering a world, without enslaving the people. We changed it with memory, with truth, with stories. The debts we collected weren't paid in gold. They were paid in memory, in kindness, in a galaxy that finally understood what we had always known, that kindness matters, that help matters, that every life saved creates a debt that can never be repaid, only remembered, and in remembering, honored. I am the last one now, the last human who remembers the famine firsthand, the camps, the dying children. I am older than anyone has a right to be, held together by machines and memory, by the stories I still carry, by the debts I still remember. They come to me sometimes, the young ones, human and alien alike. They ask about the old days, about the famine, about the Varn, about the reckoning. I tell them the stories, the ships we gave, the food we sent, the lives we saved, the thanks forgotten, the debt collected. They listen, they always listen, because they know the stories matter. They know memory matters. They know the galaxy we live in now, kinder and gentler than the one I was born into, exists because we refused to forget, because we collected debts not in gold, but in memory, because we made the galaxy remember. The Varn still exist, humbled, quiet. They tell the story now, to their children, to anyone who will listen. They tell of the species they betrayed, the debt they forgot, the memory that saved them. They are grateful, not for forgiveness, for being remembered, for being part of the story, for being reminded that kindness matters. The other species too, the Xylos, the Orin, the Dral, they all tell the story, our story, the story of humans who gave everything and asked only to be remembered, the story of a debt that changed the galaxy. I am the last one. When I go, the first-hand memory goes with me, but the story remains, in the hearts of every species, in the memory of every world, in the debt that was never repaid, only remembered, and in remembering, honored forever. The galaxy owes us nothing now, because we already collected. We collected the only thing that ever mattered. We collected their memory. We collected their story. We collected their souls. And they will never, ever forget.